Okay, 4 o'clock. It's a great pleasure to welcome Paula Apsell, who is the senior executive producer of the widely acclaimed science program NOVA, who will talk to us today about the art of science television. I promised Paul I would not mention dates, so I'll speak euphemistically about the fact that she started at WGBH relatively soon after graduating from Brandeis University. And then she, after 4 or 5 years at WGBH, she joined NOVA, where she became a producer of documentaries on topics as varied as artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and aviation safety. A bit later, about 6 years later, she left WGBH to join Channel 5 here in Boston as a senior producer for medical programming. After 4 years, I believe it was, at Channel 5, she returned to WGBH, where in addition to becoming the senior executive producer of NOVA, she also serves as the director of the WGBH Science Unit, whose productions include, and I've written it down so I don't get it wrong, The Elegant Universe, Origins, Einstein's Big Idea, Judgment Day, Intelligent Design on Trial, Making Stuff, and the large format feature Shackleton's Antarctic Adventure. NOVA has been the recipient of almost every major broadcasting award, in many cases several times over, including, and again I'll refer to my sheet here, the Emmy Award, the Peabody Award, the AAAS Science Journalism Award, the Academy Award nomination for special effects, and the first ever Public Service Award given by the National Science Board of the NSF. Paula's personal accolades are just too numerous to list here and still leave time for her talk, but I encourage you to look at her webpage. It's truly impressive. As those of you who regularly attend our colloquium series are aware, it's somewhat unusual for us to stray from the purely technical in these talks, but today I believe there are at least 2 reasons for doing so. The first is personal in the sense that I think many of us were first attracted to science or had our pre-existing interest in science strengthened as a result of great science programming that captivated us and inspired us. And today, as scientists, I think we all share the goal of communicating our discoveries, and NOVA arguably is among the gold standards for doing so. The second reason relates to the public's trust in science, which arguably is more important today than ever. And there's a great line from the Marx Brothers' classic 1933 movie, Duck Soup, in which Chico Marx is arguing with Margaret Dumont, their perennial foil, and Chico is trying to make her doubt something that she just witnessed that happened right in front of her moments earlier. She just wouldn't be persuaded, and in great frustration, Chico says to her, "Hey, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes?" So that phrase, I think, perfectly captures the tug of war between in the public arena that often arises in the public arena between vested interests and the data. And ultimately, whether it's cigarette smoking and its dangers, climate change, or a host of other topics, who you're going to believe comes down to whether the public believes science. And NOVA, I believe, more so than almost any other program, serves the cause of science by beautifully revealing how science works. Paula graciously accepted our invitation to come here today to tell us how she and her team at NOVA work this magic.
Let me just plug in here so we won't run out of power. Okay. So I am really delighted to be here with you today. You can all totally relax because I can promise you this will be the least technical talk that's been given in this room for a long time, if ever. So I want to speak to you today about what I sometimes call the art of science television. I've been practicing this art for a very long time at the helm of NOVA, the PBS Science series, where our goal is to tell the stories of science in a way that everyday people, non-scientists or non-specialists in any particular field, can understand and appreciate. So before we dive into how we do it, let's establish some context, starting with the big picture. So what is NOVA? In a sentence, NOVA is the longest running and most popular science program on American television. Let's unpack this a little bit. When I say longest running science series, I mean it. NOVA has been on the air since 1974, which means we're in our 42nd season. And that is an eternity in television. It's longer than Seinfeld, I Love Lucy, and Friends, though General Hospital still has a few years on us. So we make about 23 new shows a year. And as these numbers demonstrate, our reach is huge. More than 4 or 5 million people watch us on television each week. Another million plus visit our website every month. 50 million people saw NOVA at some point last year. Now, as venerable as NOVA may be, we also have to adapt to a rapidly evolving digital media landscape. And this graph shows how our series is doing with so-called cord cutters, those cheap people who don't want to pay for cable. I bet there are a lot of you in this room. So, but as they say, so NOVA is the most popular program among cord cutters when this graph was done by Advertising Age, which is a magazine for the PR business. But as they say in our business, show, don't tell, or to quote that old throwback to a bygone era, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's start with a highlight reel that summarizes better than I can do what NOVA is all about.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Let's hope. And pray.
Okay.
All right, we are into high electrification in the anvil.
Still getting a few precipitation particles through the engine.
Are we alone? I think it's the grandest of all scientific questions.
This will be the most exciting adventure we've ever undertaken on Mars.
I'm on entry. We are in powered flight. Sky Crane is started.
Tango Delta nominal.
You did this good. Touchdown confirmed. We're seeing
Why don't we ever see events unfold in reverse order? According to the laws of physics, this can happen.
If time isn't what we all think it is, then what is it? Did it have a beginning? Will it have an end? Where did it come from?
Every bone that came out of the ground was something brand new to science. It was really amazing.
We see the launching of the career that led to Homo sapiens.
I became deeply interested in understanding who are you in this world? What is the nature of my experience?
We're the Starsky and Hutch of science nerds. I don't think you have enough aluminum foil on this oven.
We are seeing actual atoms. Isn't this a historic technological achievement?
Venus is so hot, it'll cook a 16-inch pepperoni pizza out on the windowsill in 9 seconds. We still don't know the origin of life. We wonder if life was once on Mars.
Isn't the trouble with your job the not knowing?
That is not the trouble, that is the seduction.
payoffs have been huge. I mean, we see something nobody's ever seen before. And the planet Earth deserves to know about it.
Look at this! Let's get moving.
So that's what we do, but why do we do it? So I don't think I have to convince anyone in this room that science and communicating science matter. But it's worth reviewing a few of the reasons why they're so important. For starters, science is the key to a healthy economy. Economists may argue about exactly how many scientists and engineers our country needs to thrive, but one thing they actually agree on: science drives growth. But it's not just about dollars and cents. The list of critical problems facing our society that hinge on science keeps growing. To have informed debates and come up with effective policies about issues like climate change and vaccination, Americans need to be comfortable engaging with science. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening. We've all seen plenty of scary figures about science literacy in the American public. I'd like to highlight a few things that jumped out at me from a report on the Pew Research Center earlier this year, looking at public views on science and its impact on society. First, on many issues, there's a huge gap between the views of scientists and those of the public at large. For example, 88% of scientists think GMO foods are safe versus just 37% of U.S. adults. And while scientists are nearly unanimous in their agreement that humans evolved from apes, just 65% of the public agrees. Climate change is another issue where people are out of step with scientists. Just 50% of adults surveyed think that climate change is mainly caused by human activity. Another sobering conclusion from the study is that a sizable percentage of the public believes that scientists are still arguing over issues that have long been settled. For example, 37% think scientists disagree over whether human activity is warming our planet. Even more surprisingly, 29% claim that scientists don't agree that humans evolved over time. Not so surprisingly, scientists are deeply disturbed by this lack of science literacy. 84% of them say it's a major problem for science. And the problem extends to schools, which struggle to teach math and science to kids. I believe these problems are related because it's hard to spark interest and engage the mind of young people if the general mood in society is apathetic to, or even worse, skeptical of science. And that's why we make a major effort to help teachers and students by providing many different types of video resources for the classroom free of charge. So that's what we do and why we do it. Now let's turn to the all-important question implied by the title of this talk, how we do it. Simply put, we do it by inspiring people, helping them to understand that science is not a set of facts they have to memorize, but a process. Our main goal is to turn our viewers on to the pleasure of finding things out, as the late physicist Richard Feynman used to say. And to do that, we need to create programs that are a blend of education and entertainment, to give our viewers something smart and something fun at the same time. One viewer wrote that Nova is living proof that turning your brain on at the end of the day is actually more rejuvenating than turning it off. We love this from Reddit. It made us feel so cool. So how do we make these shows so that they're both educational and entertaining? It's so simple in theory, it's almost embarrassing to say. You just have to tell a good story. Worthy subjects are plentiful, but good stories are harder to find. Most of our valuable ideas come to us from scientists and producers, but one of the occupational hazards of working in television is that you get pitched by everyone, on the train, the plane, in a restaurant. Anyone who owns a video camera or whoever took a science course has a great idea that just ought to be on Nova. But what most of these pitches have in common is that they're topics, not stories. And 100 facts about even the most interesting science topic is not going to make a good NOVA. So we're looking for a topic that has a natural storyline, a mystery to be solved, a mission to be accomplished, an obstacle to be overcome. These are the ingredients of any good story, and a science story is no different. So here's an example from a show called Smartest Machine on Earth. For a time, we'd been searching for a way to cover artificial intelligence. We had a topic, but no story. Many years ago, when I was a NOVA producer, I made a film called Mind Machines, and I've been looking for a chance to revisit AI ever since. When we found out about a computer named Watson, I thought I'd found it. Watson was built with one mission in mind: to beat human contestants at Jeopardy. So let's take a look at how we structured the story.
The stage is set for a showdown the world will be watching. All eyes will be on one competitor, but he's not breaking a sweat. We're not talking nerves of steel, more like a rock-solid memory of silicon.
My name is Watson.
For the first time in history, a computer will compete in the ultimate brain game.
Jeopardy!
For the scientists who created Watson, the excitement and tension are palpable.
It's going to be edge of your seat. It's going to be nerve-wracking.
A 4-year odyssey comes down to this.
What really is going to happen? And you just don't know. You don't know.
There are more than reputations at stake. Some say a Watson victory could signal a new age, a revolution in artificial intelligence.
It used to be the case that intelligence was chess, right? If you can play chess, that's intelligence.
But taking on spoken language and ferocious wordplay means engaging by a whole new set of rules. It requires more than just memory to match wits with humans.
Watson! Just understanding the question is a pretty big deal.
How will Watson do it? NOVA gets unique access to the making of Watson, shadowing the IBM team working around the clock, training and test driving Watson.
What is mosquito?
No.
Holiday?
No.
Artificial. Sweetener. Come on now. No.
I don't understand the question. I don't understand what. We don't understand the category.
That was one of the tensest days I've ever had.
You fall flat on your face. Did I expect to get fired? No, but maybe. We came back, and the game was neck and neck.
Wordsworth said they soar, but never roam. Watson?
What is skylark?
That is correct.
Is Watson ready to face the game's all-time champions?
This is too daunting a task for a computer.
I think we've gone from impressed to blown away.
When man takes on machine, who will win?
Watson! What is creed?
Yes.
NOVA takes you inside the world of artificial intelligence and the quest to build a computer like none before.
Good luck, Watson.
Smartest machine on Earth. On NOVA.
So this was a great human saga, a bunch of guys taking on something that hadn't been done before and putting their jobs on the line that they could do it. The question was how we could make sure that science was a part of the story. The key was machine learning, and here's how we explained it without a single line of code.
To build on Watson's foundation of data and rules, the team turns to a powerful tool in the computing world. It's called machine learning.
Machine learning is just like human learning from examples.
Before, people would just write rules by hand. Nowadays, it's all based on examples.
To understand how machine learning works, consider for a moment the letter A. What if you had to describe it to a computer? It's a real problem faced by the U.S. Postal Service, whose computers must decipher all kinds of addresses, printed and handwritten.
We all know what an A looks like. I know when I see it, but there's just way too many different types of A's. There are fonts where the A is just a triangle pointing up, right? That's an A. Pretty quickly you realize there is no simple set of rules that you can write down currently for a program to determine whether a letter is an A or not.
Humans might not be able to come up with the rules that reliably identify all kinds of A's, but it turns out a computer can do it for itself, if you give it enough examples.
The way you do it is you just get an A, send it to the program, and say, that's an A. Here's another A, different one, that's an A. Here's another A, it's a different one, that's an A. Then you would give it another example, and you would give it another example, and you would do that 1,000,000 times.
The computer hunts for patterns among all those examples, and it finds them. So the next time it meets a letter A, even one it hasn't seen before, it will recognize it. This is machine learning, and it's a crucial element of Watson's programming. The team trains Watson. But here, instead of letters, the examples are tens of thousands of old Jeopardy questions, along with a cheat sheet of all the correct answers. Using machine learning, Watson will hunt for patterns between the type of question, the correct answer, and the kinds of evidence that support that answer.
The smartest machine on Earth was a gift because we were handed a natural storyline, a real-world obstacle that had to be overcome. Now, finding ways to make topics into stories is crucial, but television is at heart a visual medium. And when we talk to viewers, they tell us that they want to see beautiful pictures and get a perspective they can't get anywhere else. So for Nova, right up there with story is the importance of high-quality visuals. And the amazing new tools of scientific visualization and computer graphics are giving us new opportunities all the time. A good illustration of this is a geology miniseries that started airing last night called Making North America. In over 3 episodes, geologist Kirk Johnson, the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, takes viewers on a 4-billion-year epic journey to understand how our beloved continent came to be. As you can guess from the title, the series is full of gorgeous landscape photography from iconic sites like the Grand Canyon to lesser-known wonders like Monument Rocks in western Kansas, pictured here. Besides being beautiful to look at, of course, these locations were chosen because they help us illustrate important geological processes and key moments in the history of North America. For example, these jagged slabs of sandstone jutting out of the ground on a golf course in Colorado, no less, are remnants of the ancestral Rockies, the original version of the mountains that we see today. Beautiful landscapes alone, however, don't tell us how they came to be. So how do we convey just how profoundly the features that seem so permanent to us are merely the latest version of a landscape that has changed profoundly time and time again? As you watch the next clip, see how we combine photography with graphics to virtually peel back the geological layers, revealing hidden structures and helping our viewers understand how titanic forces acting over the vastness of deep time have forged the land we call home.
North America, the land that we love. It looks pretty familiar, don't you think? Well, think again. The ground we walk on is full of surprises, if you know where to look.
As a geologist, the Grand Canyon is perhaps the best place in the world. Every single one of these layers tells its own story about what North America was like when that layer was deposited.
So you ready for a little time traveling? I'm Kirk Johnson, the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. And in this 3-part Nova special, I'll take you on the field trip of a lifetime.
Look at that rock right there. That is crazy.
To find out, how did our amazing continent get to be the way it is?
Underneath Lake Superior, that's about 30 miles.
30 miles of volcanic rock.
How did the landscape shape the creatures who lived and died here?
Doesn't look like much, but this layer is Armageddon.
And how did we turn the rocks of our homeland into riches?
This thing is phenomenal.
We'll hunt down the clues to our continent's epic past. Some right in the heart of New York City.
Whoa! I've always wanted to do this.
This place was once surrounded by mountains as high as the Rockies. But now they're eroded away to nothing.
We know one thing for sure in geology: no landscape is permanent.
Why did North America give rise to so many different kinds of dinosaurs?
Yikes, that makes a grizzly bear look like nothing.
The secret may lie in Kansas.
Go find some fossils, huh?
This giant fish once swam in a huge inland sea that split our continent in half for more than 20 million years.
So this jaw is huge. I mean, this must have been an immense fish.
14 feet long.
14-foot long fish in Kansas.
That's what I'm telling you.
But what about us? How did we get here? 20,000 years ago, much of North America was locked behind an enormous wall of ice.
Here we go. This is not the easiest thing in the world. You know, it's hard to imagine somebody crossing even one ice field like this 25,000 years ago. This is insane.
Unforgiving, yet rewarding. This land's treasures helped build our civilization, offering riches born in a violent past.
I've always thought of earthquakes as very destructive kinds of things.
Every time you look at a vein of quartz, you're really seeing an ancient earthquake. It's the way to the gold.
Wow, incredible.
It's an epic tale, playing out over 4 billion years. A journey of discovery through our own backyard. As we peel back the layers and turn back the clock.
That is unbelievable! Palm tree in Alaska.
Find out what's hiding beneath our feet. Making North America, this fall on Nova.
So, as you've seen, we go to great lengths to tell good stories and use powerful visuals to help our audience see and understand the world in new ways. But none of this really adds up to much without the human touch, which brings me to the third element of storytelling, character, because science is, above all, a human endeavor. A great example of this is the show that will be airing right after Making North America, called Inside Einstein's Mind. It's Nova's contribution to the centennial celebration of Einstein's brilliant theory of gravity, general relativity. As you can imagine, we've covered this topic in many programs over the years, including major miniseries like The Fabric of the Cosmos with Brian Greene. In this film, the director did a beautiful job of visualizing the thought experiments which gave Einstein the key insights that led him to develop first special, then general relativity. Einstein was rightly hailed as a genius for this profound intellectual achievement, arguably one of the greatest in the history of scientific thought. One man, with the power of his mind, forever changed our understanding of space-time and the force of gravity which orders the cosmos. But it's all too easy to forget that this genius was just a man, and therefore subject to the same kinds of pressures we all face. So I'd like to show you a clip from the middle of the film, where Einstein was racing to complete his theory. As you'll see, nothing seemed certain, and character was every bit as relevant as intellect.
Einstein now has everything he needs to formulate his final theory of gravity. But he makes a critical mistake. He misinterprets one of his equations, and unaware of his error, continues working on incorrect ideas.
The point at which Einstein is going to give the most essential equations of the theory, Einstein considers something like them and then says, but these don't work, and then writes down the wrong equations. What follows are alternations of confidence and despair, as he convinces himself that everything's fine with this theory, and then he realizes that things aren't so good with the theory. It is a long, dark period for Einstein as he struggles to reconcile himself with a theory that is just not working.
Two years later, Einstein is in Berlin. At just 36 years old, he has one of the most prestigious positions in physics, but he is still struggling with his theory.
By 1950, he'd reached the pinnacle of the profession. He's in the Prussian Academy and a professor at the University of Berlin, but his marriage has fallen apart. His wife and his 2 kids have moved back to Switzerland. So he's pacing around almost all alone in this apartment in Berlin.
And now he has a competitor. Einstein had enthusiastically shared his ideas with the brilliant mathematician David Hilbert. Hilbert was so impressed, he decided to work on the theory himself. Einstein is now in a race to the finish with one of the world's best mathematicians.
This is unfolding in a remarkably dramatic period in history. World War I has begun to ravage Central Europe. Einstein is not just toiling sort of in the abstract, he's toiling as the world seems to fall apart.
By November 1915, Einstein is scheduled to present his work in a series of 4 weekly lectures at the esteemed Prussian Academy. But he's struggling to formulate his ideas. In the midst of these challenges, letters arrive from his wife in Zurich, pressing the issue of his financial obligations to his family and discussing contact with his sons. As his lectures begin, his theory is still far from complete. The pressure on Einstein is huge.
So story, visuals, character, and process. It's been the time-honored formula for making Nova documentaries for more than 40 years. Some of our most successful shows have covered important discoveries in your areas of research, astronomy and astrophysics. Viewers simply love shows about space exploration, whether it's closer to home in our own solar system or contemplating the universe as a whole. That's why I'm glad to let you know that we're starting production on a 2-hour special on black holes hosted by Jana Levin of Barnard College and Columbia University. Now let's take a look at a recent show called Pluto Flyby that we broadcast the same day the images from NASA's New Horizons mission came back to Earth. Summer is usually a really slow time for us in terms of audience, but this show got great ratings, in part due to all the excitement about the mission and what might it reveal about Pluto. We actually left a hole in the show for the first close flyby images, dropping them in just hours before the broadcast. Because the show did so well and the science mission has just begun, we hope to follow up with another Pluto show in the near future. Let's watch a clip.
Pluto, an icy dwarf planet 3 billion miles from Earth. Our most powerful telescopes see only a blur until now. We have liftoff. A space probe called New Horizons is on its way.
This is an epic journey.
To the far reaches of our solar system.
It's going farther than any exploration by human beings ever has.
To capture images of a mysterious world that may hold the secret to the origins of our solar system.
Are there going to be surprises? Absolutely.
But not all the surprises are good.
About 1:55 p.m. local, we've lost signal with the spacecraft.
Could it be we hit something?
But a last-minute rescue saves the day. As Pluto comes into focus, revealing a world stranger than we ever imagined.
Wow, there's a heart on it.
Chasing Pluto, right now on Nova.
So this was such a great story of perseverance over many years and a testament to human curiosity and ingenuity. Our audience really responded to it, and we saw great engagement around the show on social media. For example, this short video we posted featuring Clyde Tombaug's children, and that was Annette Tombaugh, talking about the heart, sharing what it meant to them to have their father's ashes on the New Horizon probe, received many touching comments and over 175,000 views. So I'd like to show one more clip from another popular show we made called Alien Planets Revealed, about the Kepler mission and the search for exoplanets. In it, you'll see your Harvard colleague Dave Charbonneau help us explain to viewers how the transit method for identifying planets orbiting distant stars works. It's a classic example of how we employ visual metaphors to make science concepts more accessible to our audience.
But Kepler isn't looking for stars. It's looking for planets that orbit the stars. But that's a problem, because Kepler can't directly see planets. Planets are much smaller and dimmer than stars. They get lost in the glare. So Kepler's looking for something called a transit, which occurs when a planet passes in front of the star. As it does so, it dims the light by a fraction. That dimming is what Kepler is designed to detect. It's a principle that can be illustrated with a distant tower and a spotlight.
Okay, let's imagine that there's a moth flying around that spotlight. Could we ever hope to see the moth? No way. The moth, although it does reflect a tiny bit of the spotlight's light, it's far too feeble for us to see that.
Since the light reflected off a planet is typically 10 billion times fainter than the light emitted by its star, detecting a planet might seem impossible. But Kepler has a way around that problem.
If the moth passes in front of the bright light, a little bit of the light that was going to reach us obviously gets blocked by the moth. Then we are able to detect the moth by measuring very carefully that very subtle change in the total brightness of the spotlight.
The bigger the moth, the more light it blocks, and the more the light dims.
In exactly the same fashion, that's how we can detect small planets orbiting other stars and even measure their sizes.
That's Kepler's primary mission, to watch thousands of stars for signs of a transit. Scientists plot the brightness of each star in Kepler's view on a graph to see how it changes over time. This is an actual plot of one star over 2 weeks. Sure enough, every 3 days there's a tiny dip in brightness, revealing a planet orbiting this star once every 3 days. Just like the moth, the bigger the planet, the more light it blocks. In this plot, a huge planet transits in front of its star, causing a much larger dip.
So in addition to the broadcast audience, this program has been seen nearly 100,000 times online. And that's important because while television remains a great way to reach a mass audience, we're all aware that the internet has surpassed TV as a place where most people get their science information. So we're also innovating rapidly to find new ways to engage with people online. As a result, we've developed an extensive digital presence with content tailored for different audiences, content we designed to be engaging and accurate, and that's accessible 24/7, wherever and whenever people choose to access it. Each of these platforms brings with it a different audience. We used to believe that viewers went online as a result of a program to seek more information. But then Google Analytics told us that only about 3% of our web traffic came from broadcast. That was pretty disheartening, but once we faced the fact, we were able to focus our efforts with much greater success. The mothership for all of this content is still the main NOVA site, consistently one of the most popular destinations on pbs.org, and from here, users can watch their favorite NOVA shows and a whole lot more. In addition to our full-length programs, we've also started producing lots of shorter web-only features. We know that a lot of people like to watch short videos and to share them as well. For example, a single video from our new Gross Science series has been viewed nearly 2.5 million times on YouTube. Let's take a look. I'm not sure. No, I'm sorry, I don't have that clip, but you should go on Gross Science. It's about tonsil stones, and it really will gross you out. It's quite disgusting. So another major initiative we launched recently is Nova Next, a science journalism site that allows us to cover timely, topical, important stories of science. And this, in turn, has driven our social media presence, doubling our Facebook following over the past year to more than 700,000, more than any other adult PBS series, including Downton Abbey. We've also had our first successful foray into the world of mobile applications with our Elements app, which was featured as a top educational pick in the iTunes Store and has been downloaded more than 2 million times for free. And our newest educational resource is Nova Labs, a digital learning platform that offers teens and their teachers easy access to scientific data, games, and research opportunities. This project was born out of asking teens what they wanted. Their answer was clear. They wanted to learn about science by doing it, and they wanted to feel connected to the world of real research. Still, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Using this formula of storytelling, visuals, and characters that I've described, always reflecting the process of finding things out, we will continue to strive to tell the great stories of science with quality and distinction for many more years to come. Now, I'd be happy to take your questions.
But judging from
your mic,
what's that?
Behind you. Your mic is behind you.
Did I drop mine? Oh, here it is.
Okay. Judging from the number of wide eyes an hour into a talk, I'm not sure non-technical talks aren't the way to go. Maybe we should gather every Thursday to watch a different episode of Nova. Thank you so much for all that you've done. And are there questions for Paula?
Forgive me for being mercenary. That's not my job. But is the money behind Nova basically is the people that have been supporting Nova on PBS for some considerable time, I think. Are you able to support all these new adventures into social media and the internet, or is that a threat to your underlying sources of support?
No, yes. So, I mean, money is always a huge problem. I bet that's not a surprise to you. We get about half of our funds from PBS. They fund what is kind of a base, and it gives us a great base to operate. I don't begrudge it in any way. It's about $9 million. That's a lot of money. But it certainly wouldn't allow us to produce things like Making North America. Now, when Nova started out, Michael Ambrosino started Nova. He's a great personal hero of mine. He went to the BBC because, as I said before, science broadcasting here just was not on the agenda among broadcast executives. But at the BBC, it was alive and well, and it was actually water cooler television. So he went there to see how it was done, and he came back. And kind of the paradigm for Nova was that we would get about half of our programs from the sister series Horizon, and then they hired a bunch of British producers to teach us how to make the programs, because there was not a tradition of science filmmaking here. It was kind of like the revolution in reverse. Anyway, things have changed in Britain, and like everybody, unfortunately, they're chasing after ratings, and I really think it's very sad. And there are very, very, very few British programs that we can buy or co-produce, even with the BBC. So, and the BBC had an arrangement with Discovery Communications for years and years, and we were kind of shut out. And so we really need, the number of programs you can get from abroad is pathetically small. So we need more money in order to make our own programs. And that's much more expensive than buying them. And also to do special programs like Making North America, like many of the things that we do, certainly like the Fabric of the Cosmos, like the Black Holes, we have to raise money. So we get this money mainly from foundations and from individuals. The money that goes into the PBS base comes from our 300 sister stations, and many of them are very strained to pay their PBS dues. So it is always very difficult, but that's not a story that I think is unfamiliar to you, and I think that's something that we certainly share. It is very difficult. It is a constant preoccupation and a constant worry. Now, producing things online is much cheaper, and you can do a tremendous amount online with very little money. But we're not yet used to, we haven't cultivated a donor base that understands online. Online is something that there's a huge age difference. Our online audience is much younger. I think it's hard for a lot of older people to really appreciate the importance that the digital realm has for young people and for bringing people into science. So that is just a big challenge. And so we just kind of scrape by. It took, to do Making North America, it took 6 years. We worked on it for 6 years. 4 of them were raising the money, 2 of them were making the series. Much harder to raise the money than to make the series, and much less fun.
Paula, just to follow up on that, the NOVA programs I've seen on, for example, NASA programs, you know, Hubble, or Pluto, as you pointed out, Kepler, have been extraordinary. Do you get support in any form, I mean, other than cooperation from agencies like NASA, or for high energy physics from the Department of Energy?
We have gotten money from the Department of Energy for the Fabric of the Cosmos, and I think for our program with Brian on string theory, it's very difficult to get money from DOE. Oh my God, you have to have so many meetings, and you have to take apart your computer to go into it. At one time, the man who was in charge of us, I just hated going there so much because it's so time-consuming just to get into the office. And so he says, well, look, why don't we talk about it? And I said, without really realizing what I was doing, I said, fine, why don't you come to my hotel? And like, before I woo, that probably was not the right thing to say.
But you did get money.
We did get money. I don't think that was why. We did come. We had tea downstairs. So anyway, for NASA, the thing that NASA does that's helpful to us is they have very good graphics. So we can use their graphics. We can also kind of enhance their graphics. So that is useful and cuts down on the budgets for these programs. But we have a huge firewall between funding and editorial. So I wouldn't be allowed to take NASA money for a program that was about NASA in any way. So PBS is very strict about that, as they should be. We don't want the audience to believe that we're a shill for NASA, and we don't want to feel like we are either. Other questions?
Are the graphics done at WGBH, or do you subcontract that out? Where's all that work done?
We subcontract it.
Subcontract.
So for Making North America, it was done by a company in England called Fluid. And that was extremely difficult because for geology, it's about invisible stuff, and won't be a surprise to you, geologists usually, they don't agree on a lot.
Just like astronomers.
Graphics houses, caught in the middle of these deep geologic arguments, which we try to straighten out for them. And of course, we had Kirk Johnson to really help us and tell us what we needed to pay attention to. but it was difficult. So that was, and of course, you know, technology helps so much in that you don't actually have to meet with the people personally, although I'm a great believer in face-to-face meetings, at least occasionally. They can send it, and we can actually watch it together, them in London, us in Boston, through a system called CineSync. So that's really great. There is a great animator here named Mitchell Butler who does absolutely beautiful work. It is much less expensive than these big graphics houses, which are used to doing things for Hollywood. And you know, we try to explain that we don't have Hollywood budgets. So yeah, we contract out all of our graphics.
Well, I just wanted to comment because you had visited one of my classes in the past, and you told a beautiful story about the making of Runaway Universe, which for those people who remember was the story of the discovery of the acceleration of the universe, and the principles in that later went on to win the Nobel Prize. So I show that film to my class today, early in the semester, and they love it. Then we learn a little bit more about all of the science behind it, and this connects up with your idea of storytelling, because of course the story went on. They then get to see the Nobel Prize lectures of the people who were first featured in your film as they were something like 15 to 20 years earlier.
Yeah. Well, that's...
They watched the whole thing.
I mean, that's the great challenge for me is when you get pitched a topic and you think about a topic and you really have to evaluate it, and it hasn't yet really been accepted into the scientific dogma. So you have to decide whether to do it or not. And I'm so glad that we did Runaway Universe. And of course, we followed up with all those scientists, and they're really quite wonderful. But even at that time, they were, you might remember Adam talking and said, I checked it, I rechecked it. I was so afraid that I'd made a mistake. So it was really interesting. I have to say, we try to hit it more than we miss it. There was one that I missed that galls me even now, and that was the Australian doctors who figured out that ulcers were caused by bacteria, not by stress and all the other things. And when it was proposed to me, I kind of poo-pooed it. And I'm really embarrassed about it even now. And then they went on to win the Nobel Prize. So that was really bad. But you try to hit them more than you can. But I'm not batting 100, I have to say.
How long is a typical show in process? How many years, and how many shows do you start and then realize aren't going to actually pan out?
Well, it's not good to start things and spend money on them and not pan out, because we have a website which, you know, everybody can see it, including my boss, and they don't like when you start throwing away $30, $40, $50, $1,000, even more. So it's very, very, very rare that we will actually abandon a show. It really has to be terrible. Most shows can be fixed. Somehow. You may have to spend a lot of money on them. And, sometimes people just disappoint you. You probably had that experience at some point in your life where, you think a producer is really talented, you think you have a really good story, you think you have the visuals and the characters, and just comes in and it's awful. Terrible, but we have people who actually specialize in fixer-uppers. They do, and they're great. They're really great at it. So we always have a couple of fixer-uppers in process at any one time. I would say most of our shows take about 8 months to do, from start to finish. Occasionally they can take a lot longer. We do these quick turnarounds, like we did one on Hurricane Sandy, we did one on Haiyan, the typhoon that hit the Philippines, and those can be we did Hurricane Sandy in 3 weeks. That was pretty horrendous. That was a lot of all-nighters, and I am way too old for all-nighters, although I can still do them, really. And I love to show up the young people because, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, where's breakfast? And they're like dying. So we did. Pluto was an all-nighter, and we finally finished getting it together with the big hole in it because we had to re-edit parts. We had made the show, But then we realized at the very beginning wasn't really right because we had learned a lot that day at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins. So we had to kind of fix up. We brought our editor. We had a whole editing Avid setup in our hotel room. And so we were, embarked on fixing it. We had to have the whole show with a certain, I think, a 3-minute hole in it for the pictures and the information that would come down the next day. I had to do an interview with WGBH Radio at, I think, 6 o'clock in the morning. So it was 4:30 when we finished. And I was way too afraid to go to sleep. I was afraid I wasn't going to wake up. I was pretty tired, but I haven't done an all-nighter since. I can't say I love them. But anyway, so we can do them very quickly if we have to. But most of them are 8 months, and some of them are longer. It really is not much standardization. This is handwork. It really is. It's not made by robots. It's handwork made by people who have different skill sets, and it takes people different amounts of time. Some of the shows are harder than others, too. Some of them are really hard. Yeah.
In your opinion, is it necessary, and is there a way of making the scientific shows? I can give you an example. 3 days ago, I was in Russia, and I turned on the TV in the morning on a non-political channel, and there was a pseudo-scientific show which was made by very talented producer that put together interviews by NASA scientists, beautiful NASA graphics, with interviews by psychics, specialists on extraterrestrial activities, and so on and so forth. And so for general audience, there would be an impression that, NASA scientists had the proof that aliens did exist and visited Earth, but they were hiding it from the general public. So, is there a way to fight this?
Yeah, well, is there a way to fight it? We don't do it for a lot of reasons. One, because I think it's stupid. And, when you're in journalism for long enough, I have a skeptical mind about just about everything. But second, I wouldn't do it because then when I came to you and I want your time and your cooperation, you're going to remember that we did a show on mermaids, and you're probably not going to want to take the risk to put yourself at the mercy of some journalist who's not going to let you see what we do till it's on the air. I mean, this is a relationship of trust, and we always want to be worthy of the trust of the scientists. Because without the scientific community, without your support, we can't do what we do. So we're always very aware of that. Now, there are some shows, and I'll give you a funny example, that some people may think are pseudoscience and we don't. And that's a lot of archaeology shows, for example. So we did a show on Noah's Ark a few weeks ago. It is wildly popular. And I actually thought it was a very good show because what it did was it looked at the biblical story, and it asked the question, where does this come from? And a tablet had been found in Iraq, which an archaeologist and an expert in cuneiform had done a major study of. And it followed that to see how the Gilgamesh and the flood stories of the Middle East had ultimately influenced the biblical story. So it kind of traced it back. Some of our viewers, on Facebook, these people do not hesitate to pass their opinion. So this was very funny, and this was so profane, I really can't tell you about it exactly, but it was so funny. But the thing about Facebook is it's so great, it's self-correcting. You just let these people go at each other. And it's great. So this guy answered, basically, in really very spicy language, which I won't use here, you idiots. It's called a metaphor. The show is about boats and ancient flood myths. Why can't you get that? Are your own beliefs so tenuous and so feeble that you have to just go crazy about and that they can be displaced by an hour of television. I love this. And he said, why do you think the people at Nova would suddenly go way off the rails and do something crazy about the Bible? It was really very funny. And we have a very vibrant audience on Facebook, and they really take each other to task. So I think pseudoscience would be horrible. I think would betray the trust that scientists have in us. But I do also have to say that different people have different ideas of what is pseudoscience. And sometimes there are people, I can't tell you how many times one scientist will say about the work of another scientist that's been published. Really? It was in Nature.
We'll get back to that next Thursday at 4. Paula, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you have a special social media unit, and who comes up with the ideas like gross science and the topics for it?
Well, we have a digital unit. I mean, we try to work as a very integrated organization, but we do have a digital unit. And gross science was developed by a young woman named Anna Rothschild, and she just had the idea for it, and we let her go with it. And she's done a great job. We've done about 45 episodes, but where each one kind of grosser than the next. She seems to have an endless idea of, endless thoughts of really disgusting things to do. And kids really love it. And, I do really believe, but there's a lot of science in it. I just think it's so important to meet kids where they're at. And, this may not be what Paula wants to see or what, although I do find them very entertaining. So yes, we have one social media person. So although we all, even I tweet, so you can follow me at Mama Nova. I'm tweeting now mostly about geology, but it's really fun. I get really excited when I have new followers. So. Anyway, I feel very cool when I tweet. I feel compelled to tell everybody, I just tweeted. They get very amused by it. So, but it's really just one person. So, it's an area that we really want to grow because in many ways it is the future. And eventually these two media are going to merge. Probably we all have no idea how and when and why that will occur and what will happen, but...
Any other, Bernie?
I think that you're doing wonderful work.
Thank you.
But I'd like to come back to a point that you showed much earlier, and that is, why do American students do so badly in science and math on the PISA test, for example? And there are two possible answers. The standard one is not good enough teachers in science. But has anybody ever done a study on not looking at the average, looking at the distribution? What are the higher moments of the distribution?
So there was actually an article in, I think it was yesterday's New York Times by Eduardo Porter, which you should really look up. If you give me a card, I can forward it to you. We're doing a show
Was that
called...
the one about socioeconomic?
Yeah,
averages?
it was, right. And it was about the distribution.
Yeah,
Basically, they said if Massachusetts were a country, we would be as high as Canada and Finland, which are some of the highest scoring on the PISA test. And that the problem is that not the same people go to school in these different countries, so you're comparing apples and oranges. And there are other people who Andreas Schliefer, I think his name is, from the PISA test, disagrees with this. I am not really qualified to study it, but I think it's really merits some study with the statistics. But in the end, I think we come down to, even if you believe that, even if you believe that the U.S. is not as bad as it looks because we're only doing poorly because we have disadvantaged kids, okay, well, that just tells us that we need to learn how to teach kids who may be harder to teach because they don't come from homes that have a lot of educational advantages.
I had a second part of my question.
Sorry.
And that is, we think of the Apollo era as being an era when a magnificent project successfully carried out was carried out with the great acceptance of the population. However, the fraction of the population that really supported the Apollo mission was about 40%. Now, you would say, how did it happen? And it happened because it had the backing of the intellectual leaders. It's sort of this is a contrarian view. Of course you try to read.
Watch us aren't necessarily the most intellectual, the most affluent, but it is a lot of people, 50 million people in a year. So, but I think it's very important. I think you know, the balance that we try to strike is making programs that we think are important because the topics are important, because they say something, they tell a great science story, and on the other hand, to try to do popular audiences that will work, popular programs that will work with an audience. And it's always a balance. And you just think about it. I mean, it's something I think about all the time, every day. There's no day that I'm not making some kind of decision in that area, which is probably a healthy balance, I think. So, I mean, I think if we had no ratings pressure and we just could make programs on topics we wanted to, I think there's a danger of getting very esoteric. On the other hand, I think if it's all ratings pressure, that would be terrible. And for me, the work would be so boring that I really wouldn't even want to do it. Because these shows they take so much effort that if they're not on something that you love, that you really love to think about, honestly, it's not really worth doing. I don't really myself like to make programs that are just, we used to call it TRSH, transparent rating seeking hype. I could do that every day of the week. I know how to do it, but it just would bore me intellectually. So one of the things is to try to take, one of our big sellers is a program on sinkholes. Now you could call that TRSH and I wouldn't really fight you. But Larry Klein, my producer, really made a good program on it. And it is an important topic, particularly if you live in Florida. Or if you're thinking of buying land in Florida. Don't do it. Bad financial move.
Any other questions?
I was just wondering, what do you think about NOVA's impact on social issues, say the position of women in science, or say issues maybe of gay people and such things like that? Do you think NOVA has a position there as well?
Well, we have a position in that I believe, and my team believes this too, that no matter who you are, when you watch one of our programs, you should see someone who looks like you. And to be very honest with you, I don't think we've done very well in this in the past, partly because we wanted to get the best spokesperson for a topic. And that meant, as my grandmother would say, going to the top man, and it usually was a man. And now we've really kind of moderated that. And we need to find an articulate person, but if you just stick with the top ranks in a lab, you're only going to have men for the most part, although it is changing, but it's changing more slowly than I think all of us would like. So now we really try to find women, we really try to find diverse images, people of color, who are good talkers. We can't have bad talkers in our program because no one wants to hear that. And we don't want to sit with it in an edit room either. So there is a certain level of ability, but you don't have to be the person in the lab who has published the most and who's been elected to the national academies. Because if we do, we just don't get. So that is our position. One of the things on black holes, I'm sure you all know, there are a lot of women who are in the field of black holes, and we sort of applauding and saying, wouldn't it be really fun to have a program that's all women? Because we have had so many programs that are all men, though not much anymore. So that is our position. We're trying. It's hard to get out front of science itself, so because we're kind of in lockstep with you, but I think as things change, we try to represent it. It's important.
Well, Paula's on a tight schedule, so let's thank her again for a remarkable